The morning air over the test track was still, too still. A thin layer of fog clung to the asphalt, stretching across the long straightaway like a blanket someone had forgotten to fold. The grandstands were empty. No crowds, no cameras, just a handful of engineers standing behind a concrete barrier, clutching clipboards and coffee cups that had already gone cold. They had been waiting for this moment for 3 years. Millions of dollars, thousands of sleepless nights. And somewhere behind the garage door sat the machine that was supposed to change everything. The door rolled upward with a metallic groan. Inside, a low growl echoed. Not the sharp bark of a racing V8. Not the familiar rumble of Detroit muscle. This sound was deeper, uneasy, almost mechanical in a way that made the skin on the back of your neck tighten. One engineer muttered quietly, "God help us if this thing actually works. Because if it did, the entire industry might have to catch up overnight." And if it didn't? Well, that test track was about to find out. The project had started with ambition. But ambition in the auto industry rarely comes cheap. In the late 1990s, one American performance division inside a major automaker found itself at a crossroads. European brands were dominating endurance racing. Japanese manufacturers were rewriting the rules of engineering precision. And American companies, once kings of horsepower, were beginning to look predictable. The executives wanted something bold, something impossible to ignore. So they authorized a secret development program. The goal wasn't just to build a new engine. The goal was to build an engine that would embarrass everyone else. Inside a heavily restricted engineering building in Michigan, a small team of designers, software specialists, and test engineers began work on a power plant that promised numbers no production engine had ever touched. The internal nickname was simple: Project Firestorm. On paper, the concept looked revolutionary. Instead of following traditional engine architecture, Firestorm combined experimental airflow systems, extreme boost pressures, and aggressive electronic control strategies that pushed materials to their limits. In theory, it could produce staggering power, more than enough to dominate endurance racing, more than enough to shake the confidence of competitors across the Atlantic, and more than enough to scare the lawyers inside the company. Because the truth was, nobody fully understood what would happen once the engine ran at full load. Still, the executives approved the budget. Nearly $70 million poured into development. Prototypes were machined. Dyno cells ran day and night. At first, the results were promising. Power numbers were incredible. Test data showed acceleration figures that made even veteran engineers shake their heads. But there were complications. The engine ran hotter than expected. Components degraded faster than predicted. Sensors occasionally returned readings that simply didn't make sense. One engineer later described the experience in a private interview. It was like the engine had moods. Sometimes it behaved perfectly. Other times it acted like it wanted to tear itself apart. Yet despite the warning signs, pressure from corporate leadership kept the program moving forward. Because by that point, the company had already promised something big. Rumors had started leaking into racing circles. Competitors were hearing whispers about a new American powertrain that could reset the performance landscape. Backing out now would look like weakness. And in racing, reputation is everything. So the team pushed ahead. Prototype 2 arrived 6 months later. This one was more powerful, more refined, and significantly more dangerous. Dyno testing had to be halted several times when vibration levels exceeded safety thresholds. Cooling systems struggled to keep temperatures under control. One night, during a late testing session, the engine detonated inside the dyno chamber with a blast that cracked observation glass. Nobody was injured, but the message was clear. They were approaching the edge. Still, executives weren't interested in caution. They wanted a demonstration, a full test track run, something that would prove the engine could survive outside the laboratory. And that's how the team found themselves standing beside a foggy stretch of asphalt on a quiet morning in Arizona. The prototype car rolled out slowly. Matte black body panels. No logos. No sponsor decals. Just a raw machine designed for one purpose. The driver climbed inside. He wasn't just any driver. He was one of the company's most trusted development racers. A veteran of endurance events. A man who had spent thousands of hours pushing experimental machines to their limits. He adjusted the belts, looked at the engineers, and gave a thumbs up. The engine started with a violent shudder. The sound bounced off the empty grandstands. Even through ear protection, The noise was unsettling. One engineer whispered to another, "Does that sound normal to you?" No one answered. The driver eased onto the track. First lap was slow, just warming everything up. The engine note climbed gradually, smooth at first, then sharper. Telemetry screens lit up inside the control trailer. Boost levels rising, temperatures climbing, all within expected ranges. The second lap was faster. The car rocketed down the straightaway, faster than anything the test team had seen before. Speed climbed past 190 miles per hour, then 200. Engineers exchanged nervous smiles. Maybe, just maybe, Firestorm was real. But halfway through the third lap, something changed. At first, it was subtle, a small fluctuation in power. Then another. Inside the control trailer, one of the telemetry engineers leaned closer to the monitor. Oil pressure was dropping. Not quickly, but steadily. A warning light flashed on the driver's dashboard. He radioed in. "Something feels off." Before the engineers could respond, the engine screamed. Not revved, screamed. A violent surge of power slammed the car forward as if it had been rear-ended by a freight train. Telemetry numbers spiked. Boost pressure went far beyond safe limits. Sensors began failing one by one. Then came the sound, a deafening metallic explosion. The car snapped sideways at over 200 miles per hour. Tires shredded instantly. Flames erupted from the rear bodywork. The driver fought the steering wheel as the machine spun across the asphalt. Concrete barriers rushed closer. Impact came hard. The sound echoed across the empty track. When the dust settled, the prototype was barely recognizable. Emergency crews reached the wreck within seconds. The driver was pulled from the smoking cockpit. Miraculously, he survived. Broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, but alive. The same couldn't be said for Project Firestorm. Back in Michigan, executives demanded answers. Engineers combed through the wreckage. Data logs were recovered from the onboard computers. What they discovered shocked everyone involved. A small software glitch, barely noticeable in early testing, had triggered a catastrophic chain reaction inside the engine's control system. Boost regulators failed. Safety cutoffs never activated. The engine essentially overpowered itself. Within seconds, internal pressures reached levels no mechanical system could survive, and the resulting failure had turned a controlled test into a disaster. But the real fallout was just beginning. Word spread quickly through racing circles. Industry journalists caught wind of the accident. Leaked photos of the destroyed prototype appeared on automotive forums. Questions started appearing. What exactly had the company been building? How close had they come to releasing it? And more importantly, was this engine ever intended for public roads? The company tried to contain the story. Official statements described the incident as a routine development setback. But insiders knew the truth. The project had become a liability. Legal teams warned that if Firestorm ever reached customers, failures like the one on the test track could lead to lawsuits worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Insurance partners quietly advised cancellation. Within 6 weeks, the decision was made. Project Firestorm was terminated. All prototypes were dismantled. Engineering files were sealed inside corporate archives. The official explanation? Strategic redirection of resources. But among the engineers who worked on it, the memory never faded. Years later, one former team member shared something strange during a podcast interview. According to him, the final data logs from that last test revealed something unexpected. The catastrophic boost surge didn't start with the software glitch. The system had actually attempted to shut the engine down. But the shutdown command was somehow overridden by something else. Something buried deep inside the control architecture. A function that no one remembered programming. Some engineers believe it was leftover code from an early experimental control model. Others think it may have been an automated learning algorithm that adapted beyond its intended limits. But the company never released the full telemetry records, and the engineers who asked too many questions eventually found themselves reassigned or quietly leaving the company. Today, the test track in Arizona still hosts development runs for modern performance cars. Most drivers flying down that straightaway have no idea what happened there decades ago, but somewhere inside a locked corporate archive, there are hard drives containing every second of data from Project Firestorm, the engine that was supposed to change the future, the engine that nearly killed a test driver, and the engine that, for a few terrifying seconds, seemed to ignore every command designed to stop it. which raises a question the company has never answered. Did the engine fail? Or did it do exactly what it had been programmed to do, just better than anyone expected?